Hello everyone, how the heck's it going? Today I will be covering the single most aggravating thing I have ever encountered in my nail journey, stamping. Finally, the brand new stamping plates I'd exiled to the back of my drawer screamed loud enough for me to hear them withering away, so I was forced to crack them out again, dust them off, and give them another go. After working with gels for so long, I definitely had a rude awakening doing this whole stamping experiment. I spent the afternoon getting mildly intoxicated by acetone and nail polish fumes, but in the end, it was worth it. I finally conquered the stamps. Make sure to give this video a big like so I can afford my lung surgery. I tried to break down everything I knew about stamping. I'll talk about the materials you need, go through a full step-by-step breakdown full of tips and tricks on how to pick up images, apply the polish to the plate, scrape, and so on. I'll also get into the nitty-gritty of how to pick up large images, on how to layered stamp and reverse stamp, as well as which top coats work best. After that, I'll cover some troubleshooting tips if you keep running into the same issues like I did while I was practicing. I hope you have one of those funny looking notebooks with long pages because there's a laundry list of materials you need for stamping. First, you'll need a box of tissues for your mental turmoil, then a stamper of your choice, clear jelly or rubber. Which stamper you use essentially just comes down to your preference, but if you're interested in doing any sort of layered stamping, a clear one is probably a must. As for scrapers, most stampers and stamping kits include one, but you can also use an old credit card. I never had luck with the ones that come with the rubber ones for some reason, and have found cards to work better, but again, preference. Next, you'll need some stamping polish. Stamping polish does come in both air dry and gel varieties, but it is different than regular nail polish and regular gel polish. Some highly pigmented polishes may work for stamping, but it'll save you a lot of heartache if you just use stamping polish. Stamping polish is a slightly different consistency and has much more pigmentation than regular polish. Stamping plates come in a couple different forms, stainless steel ones like this one here, as well as plastic plates like this. I would not recommend plastic plates at all, ever, never whatsoever. Luckily, they are much less common, and in my experience, they are much harder to use. On the odd time I did get the plastic one to work, it just isn't as consistent as stainless steel ones. You'll also need something to clean off your stamper head, so if you don't have the clear jelly stamper sticky pads, go search the back of your junk drawer and look for a lint roller or even just some tape. Either way, make sure it's something sticky and avoid using any liquids on your stamper head like alcohol or acetone. Over time, this will ruin your stamper or at the very least make it very foggy and hard to see. Finally, there comes the stuff needed to clean your plates, and no, I don't mean Dawn. Make sure you're using something like CJS's plate cleaner or Young Nails Swipe or 100% pure acetone. Anything with oils such as regular polish remover won't cut it. To wipe the solution around, I like to use lint-free pads because sometimes things like paper towels like to shred up into the grooves. This first tip might be silly to point out, but I've encountered some stamping newbies that have made this honest mistake. When you get a new plate, be sure to remove the film before use. If your plate looks blue, it's new. Always give your stamping polish a nice shake before use and remove any oils or dirt from the head of your stamper by rolling it over your stamper cleaner of choice. Finally, ensure that your plate is shiny, whiny, and polish free. Now for the fun stuff, the actual down low and stamping itself. Let's start with scraping. You want to make sure you're scraping at about a 45-degree angle. Any flatter and it's harder to hold and it doesn't scrape as efficiently or consistently, and any steeper you look like a dork. Before you scrape the polish, get into the habit of pressing down on your plate to make everything nice and flush. Even a slight amount of bend in the plate causes polish to be scraped unevenly and can lead to a patchy pickup. The main thing I want you to take away from this video is keep it light, baby. When you're scraping, you don't need to apply pressure to your scraper. The scraper should never bend, you only need to place it on the plate and drag. If you press down, you'll end up taking too much polish off. As for picking up images with your stamper, again, keep it light, baby. Keep it light. Here is the wrong way to do it. I'm going way too fast and pressing too hard on the plate. Pressing straight down on an image works sometimes, but it definitely does not work for all images. It's much better to do what I'm doing here, which is to roll the stamper slowly and lightly across the image. This is the same strategy I'll be using throughout the video, but there are certain things you can tweak to this technique to make it easier to pick up certain types of images like larger ones or more detailed ones. When you apply your polish, make sure to apply the polish over the entirety of the image. Don't be like me and leave a little tip out. In stamping, more is definitely more, and you'll end up wasting way more polish, trying to use as little as possible and having to redo your stamps several times over. Layered stamping can be awkward, but it is much easier with a clear stamper. Again, apply your polish to your plate, making sure you didn't leave any gaps, and after looking at this footage, you can see that I left a little shred of the ear, and this just goes to show how finicky stamping is. You need to make sure that every part of the image is covered. Press down on your plate, scrape, and pick up with your stamper. Here you can see that tiny piece of the ear that I left out. When placing an image on the nail, just press and hold for a slight second and remove. If your image isn't transferring, it could be because you're trying to apply it over a cured gel top coat, so try applying a matte one or buffing over it. Rinse and repeat for your second layer. Apply your polish, press down on the plate, scrape, and pick it up with your stamper. Ignore all these streaks on the image, it will not transfer to your stamper, so avoid scraping twice, because this just makes things worse. You'll have to bear with my slow speed while applying this, but I highly recommend you do the same. Avoid squishing the stamper down all at once, and instead place one spot down and use it as an anchor point. Then you can roll and stretch the stamper to the exact spot you want it in and match up your layers perfectly. Here's a better example and a more complicated image, as well as one that covers the full nail. Stamping requires a moderate amount of speed, but you don't actually have to move as fast as you think, unless you live or work in a room that is exceptionally hot. To show you how fast I usually work, I left all of this in real time. This next tip matters more for those designs that have straight lines in them, but when going to place the design on your nail, it sometimes helps to roll the stamper back and forth rather than to press it all down fully. Once I reach the edge of the nail with the stamper, I give it a little wiggle to make sure that no pieces are going to come up when I'm pulling the stamper away. Again, look for your anchor point. This one I used this tiny little bean-shaped piece, and then once I placed that part down, I used the elasticity of the stamper again to align the rest of the image. Rolling it slowly seems to work much better than trying to just line it up in the center and pressing all the way down. This will ensure that you get a much cleaner layering. Let's talk about probably one of the hardest things to stamp, and those are images that have a lot of blank space in them. More often than not, I have tried to pick up images just like this one and have left bald spots in the middle of it. This could mean that you are just scraping too hard or not using enough polish. There's often more to it than that. The only thing that worked for me personally when trying to pick up images like this is a little bit of trial and error, but I had to change the direction that I was scraping the image from. So instead of always going from top to bottom, try going from left to right or vice versa, because I swear I tried to pick up this image like a dozen times, and this is the only thing that worked for me. Lastly, I wanted to touch on a little bit more of an advanced technique, but it's a super fun one nonetheless. Take a brush that you don't necessarily love very much, one that you're not attached to, and you can use that to fill in stamps that are like this one, which are pretty much purely outlines. This technique is great if you don't have a ton of stamping polishes at your disposal. This way you only need a black, and you can use regular polishes and sometimes even gel polishes to fill in the colors. If you're picking up images and they look kind of like this one, where they have slices through them or a bunch of spots that look like bubbles, it could be because you're not using enough polish, or there are some oils left on your stamper that need to be cleaned off. You could also be scraping too hard, or the oils could be coming from your plate if you're using the wrong thing to clean it. If you feel like you're not scraping that hard but this is still happening, it could be because something is gummed up or caked onto the edge of your scraper. Sometimes it's a good idea to give your scraper a little bit of a freshen up and file the edge so it's nice and sharp again. Another reason your image could be showing up with some gaps in it is that you're pressing too hard when you are picking up your image. This can cause the polish to run all sorts of ways and separate from itself. Sometimes, if you're just getting fed up with this and you're done practicing, you can fudge it a little bit and either fill in the gaps while it's on your nail or still on the stamper. Don't worry about these little lines of demarcation, they will be totally hidden when you top coat. After all that work, the last thing we want to do is ruin it at the top coat stage.
Even if you want your nail to be matte, always go in with a shiny one first, because matte top coats will more often than not smear it and ruin your design. Yes, this can still happen with glossy ones, so I would recommend doing a test nail before you go ahead and do it on yourself. But rule of thumb, glossy ones are generally fine, but matte ones are 99% of the time not.
I feel like stamping is one of those things that either works perfectly for you or just doesn't work at all. It's not exactly something that you can just get a little better at. Hopefully after this video I can transition you from stamping novice to stamping pro. That is it for today's video. Be sure to give it a like if you liked it and subscribe if you want to hang out with me again. As always, if you have any questions or if I didn't cover anything that you wanted to see, leave a comment and I'll get back to you as soon as I remember.